It's amazing what he did. Without Dellinger, we wouldn't have much in the way of Arkansas archaeology.
This is really a very remarkable man. When any of us compare our careers to his, I just have to be very humbling.
It's amazing that he was able to do what it was his goal, to give Arkansas this beautiful ability to interpret our past.
Samuel Dellinger was not the first curator of the University of Arkansas Museum, but was the most active. In 1921, as a recent graduate of Columbia University, Dellinger joined the Zoology Department at the University of Arkansas as an assistant professor and was promoted to full professor in 1925. He quickly found himself as chairman for the Department of Zoology and was also asked to be curator of the museum. Either position would have been a full-time job for an ordinary man, but Dellinger served as both and retired in 1960. Sam Dellinger became one of the most popular professors at the university, as well as in the community. He was described as an unusually gifted speaker, being able to present his thoughts in plain, clear, and distinguished English. Others described him as being golden-tongued. Dellinger put his talents to work at every possible opportunity. Carrying with him a small portable museum, he spoke at various women's clubs, Rotary clubs, Boy Scouts, and campfire organizations. He was extremely progressive politically and was very successful raising money for the museum.
He may well have been one of the best representatives of the university to the remainder of the state, because he was out there giving back to the citizens throughout the state. Arkansas has perhaps one of the richest archaeological heritage of any state in eastern North America.
As of the 31st of December 2005, just over 40,000 sites on record. You can say less than 10% of the state has been looked at for sites.
This area in the Delta, the central Mississippi Valley, that area, had more Indian people living in it than anywhere in the United States. This was the Egypt, so to speak, of America, with its mound complex and trade complex. Instead of building it out of stone, which lasted long periods of time, though, they only used soil.
We never put this in comparison to what's going on in Europe at the same time period. But Cahokia, with, if it's got 15,000 people at 1100 AD, well, there aren't any cities, except maybe Cordoba and Seville or something like this, that are as big as that in Europe at the time period.
Back in the early 1920s, even in the 1890s, 1800s, as far as Thomas Jefferson, have looted burials, mounds, cemeteries for a long time.
Starting perhaps around the 1870s, there became an increasing cyclical frenzy as far as local individuals digging up Indian pottery to try to sell it. And folks living in the Arkansas River Valley were sharecroppers, and they quickly discovered that they could greatly supplement their income by removing these pottery vessels and selling them.
One of the big stories of that time period is in the 1927 flood, I think it was, up at Dardanelle. It flooded the land, and people could go out and just pick up pots off the ground. And then they started digging there, and there was actually an article written about it called Pot Hunter's Paradise.
There were a number of your eastern schools that had really begun to do digs. There were a number of mounds, and they began to be curious about what was within those mounds, and a lot of the digging started.
So Dellinger knew about this sort of thing, and he had probably seen some of these objects at museums, and was probably very indignant about the fact that this material was being displayed over on the East Coast, and none was being displayed in the state of Arkansas.
Why should we send our objects that might be used for study to become the possessions of people in different states? The local history attached to these things would give far more to the people here than they could possibly give if they were in the case of some institution in another state.
And Dellinger's main goal was, for what he did in the 30s, getting the grant and getting his students out there, was to offset the fact that people from the American Museum of Natural History and Peabody Museum and other big institutions in the East were coming and stealing our heritage.
Specimens are there that can never be found again in our state. They're sold to the big museums for a nominal sum. They're not a crop of cotton or corn that can be grown again. When they go out of state, they are lost forever.
I do know that he got out and actually purchased material. I know that he excavated material. I know that in the bluff shelters, he personally did excavations.
But he had a very possessive attitude. When in the early 40s, when Philip Schwartz and Griffin came down and did a very professional survey of the Mississippi Louisville Valley, and they're on files in the University Museum records, very sharp letters from Dellinger to the presidents of Harvard and Michigan and the director of the New York Museum, saying what dastardly cowards he thought these people were, coming down and robbing Arkansas's heritage. Why did you make them go home?
You, no doubt, realize that this state has been visited by a large number of vandals and grave robbers who have removed priceless Indian relics. If we are to save these historical sites, we must act at once, as they are being rapidly dug out by groups of worthless relic hunters acting as agents for several out-of-state dealers of these objects.
But I think the whole key thing that everyone missed in the 20s and 30s, including Mr. Dellinger, was the fact that there was a living culture still alive, connected to these objects. And this culture didn't know that this was going on.
I can see no good reason why these objects should not remain in our state. And, as I believe, it is no more than right that our boys and girls have beautiful objects to study.
He wanted to preserve these items, keep them in the state, and then make them available for not only just the general public to come in to see, but especially the school children.
He felt that by making materials available to Arkansans to view, that it truly would inspire them and make them appreciate the state in which they lived.
It's amazing what he did. The breadth of his interest is what impressed me. He's a zoologist. He's not a geologist, he's not an archaeologist. And yet the collections are broadly based in geology, history, archaeology, anthropology, you name it. It's just a world-class collection.
This is probably the best record, the most extensive and best record of what prehistoric Arkansas was like, pre-contact Arkansas was like.
And you can look at the collections here at the University of Arkansas, the Dellinger collection, and you'll see really fine artists, but you'll also see someone that was just learning.
Certainly the state of Arkansas and perhaps the world in general would be well served by people who were as passionate about important things, including conservation, as Mr. Dellinger.
He did assemble a large mass of material, and I think it's a shame that such a small percentage of that is ever on display to where the public can see it. I think we're letting him down by not getting it out for people to see. And I think this exhibit does give people an opportunity to recognize what he did and why it was important to him and to us.
I think his foresight and his passion in wanting to save Arkansas's history and wanting to make sure it stayed within Arkansas was a catalyst for a lot of people throughout the state.